Due Process, winner of 12 New York and Mid-Atlantic Emmys, including the 2008 award for Best Discussion Series.
In conclusion, I ask that you find in favor of the respondent and come to the conclusion that the petitioner's rights were not being violated.
She may sound like a lawyer, but she's really a sophomore in high school. For now, a practical program to encourage future lawyers and ensure a more representative bar. That's on the docket for this edition of Due Process.
Major funding for Due Process provided by the New Jersey State Bar Foundation, committed to educating the public about the law, and by the Fund for New Jersey, supporting informed citizens for an effective democracy.
We've come a long way since the days when my father went to law school, when black law students were a rarity, when black lawyers were just a tiny, isolated minority in the profession of law. But despite decades of well-meaning efforts at inclusion, blacks and Latinos remain underrepresented at the bar. I'm Raymond Brown, and on this edition of Due Process, increasing the numbers and starting young. We'll talk to two black lawyers who have themselves broken barriers, but have also been involved in reaching back to the young folks who come after them. Legal education, access, and effectiveness in the struggle for diversity. And to start us off, as always, Sandy King.
Raymond, with an African-American attorney as president, there are those who think that the battle's been won, that diversity's been achieved, especially in the law. But the numbers tell another story of declining percentages of minority law students and law graduates. Last week, we looked at diversity on the bench, but judges start with lawyers, and lawyers with law students. So it just makes sense that a program housed at Seton Hall Law School is starting with kids who are just starting high school.
Because the problem that we're trying to fix here is the discrimination. Right, exactly. The historic, systematic discrimination that students in the 1960s faced.
They are inner city high school kids.
So have you guys finished your briefs?
No, I'm working on my oral argument.
At home in a law school classroom.
I'm seeing the first sentence is wrong.
Exactly.
Oh, I get it.
Exactly. So we need to find a way to make the entire sentence flow together.
They're not here because they have to be. Not here for grades or credits.
See, what you're trying to say, I think, is they look for what?
Or even on school time.
To further a compelling governmental interest, because by the strict scrutiny standard, they need compelling governmental interest. Now we tailored, no race-neutral alternatives.
They are here because they want to be. Here to learn. Their subject, the law.
Our threefold mantra is skills, habits, exposure. So exposure is an important piece. That's where law students work with the students get attorney mentors, they have paid legal internships, they do mock trial competitions, debates, the whole nine.
Some of these kids may even become lawyers. That's part of the idea.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Fatima Shafiq, and I represent Will Smith, the petitioner.
Every ethnic and racial group has or should have the ability to be represented by one of their own.
But even more important is letting them know, getting them ready to see law or any other career as a real, a possible option.
Without instituting the idea of race,
I want to be an intellectual property lawyer because I like IP. I like the new inventions and people that write songs. I want to help them make copyrights and protect their ideas.
I like the idea of environmental law. I'm very green, so helping to protect our environment is something that appeals to me.
There is no such thing as a level playing field when generation after generation of African Americans have been denied access, where legacy triumphs for the sons and daughters of the wealthy whites, but where there's no equivalent for the African American or Latino population.
That way when you get up and the judge asks you, it'd be like Poe Buresky. It'd be like it's natural. Well, you have a question about it?
The program, housed here at Seton Hall Law and funded by more than a dozen corporations, law firms, and foundations, aims to make opportunity just a little more equal for city kids like these.
I didn't know any lawyers. I mean, living in East Orange, there's not many lawyers around there.
Most of us, like my family, I was the first in my family born in the U.S.
Race is awarded a plus factor in the admissions process.
When I came to law school, less than 1% of the bar consisted of black personnel. There was only one Hispanic lawyer. Today, you can't count them. And it's clear to me that that's a significant improvement over where I began.
It's been 40 years since Rutgers Law School launched its minority student program, opening the doors to an unprecedented number of blacks and Latinos and women, and changing this white male bastion into the most diverse law school in the country.
The diversity to me within the context of the law school's program has been a very important thing because it allowed for a shift away from a norm in which people that look like me were not able to get into law school.
I think we're maybe perhaps in our second, maybe third generation as far as progress in the area. I think before the minority student program at Rutgers Law School Newark started, the amount of diversity in the bar in New Jersey was unfortunately negligible.
Sadly, there has been a decline in diversity in our institutions of higher education and therefore in the legal profession.
Well, it is true that diversity in legal education has actually decreased.
What we've talked about with regard to procedural posture.
And the disparity is even greater than those numbers suggest. Law schools have gotten bigger, but the percentage of students of color at those schools has actually decreased.
We're at a point now, right, where we now have President Obama is sort of leading us, and many of us, including myself, are very hopeful about that. Shows a lot of progress we've made. Now we need to build more programs, systems, educations, and partnerships so that we empower whole groups of people.
And I want to build a profession. I want to be a professional.
The Equal Education Opportunity Program was founded because there wasn't enough African Americans and Latinos in the state university. Yeah, I'll be first generation going to college. I'm the oldest of my parents' children, so yeah. I kind of look forward to that. I mean, it's only 2.5 years. It's gonna fly.
NJ LEAP, around for just a couple of years, is still too new to show results. But the program's based on a New York model that's been underway for 25 years. That program, too, works with urban kids. And not only have those kids gotten through high school, but Raymond, 97% have gone on to college.
And when we come back, what that can mean to changing the stats and the substance of the New Jersey bar. So stay with us.
When I came to law school, less than 1% of the bar consisted of black personnel. There was only one Hispanic lawyer. Today, you can't count them. And it's clear to me that that's a significant improvement over where I began.
The most notable difference from when I went to law school is that the graduating classes are much more diverse and come close to replicating the demographic percentages in the population as a whole.
It allowed for a shift away from a norm in which people that look like me were not able to get into law school.
The playing field is by no means level. We operate in a very unequal society, and the legal profession desperately, desperately needs a diverse population of lawyers.
But consider the progress that has been made. Take, for instance, Rutgers in Newark. In 1960, only 1% of the law school population was African American. Today, it's nearly 14%, while Latinos are about 10%. Still, the numbers nationwide are less than half of those, and that's just one thing we'll be talking about with Junius Williams, director of the Abbott Leadership Institute of the Rutgers Department of Urban Education and the former president of the National Bar Association, and with Paula Tuffin. She's a former assistant United States attorney, now a litigator with Sills Cummis, but earlier in her career, she worked in education and helped launch the Manhattan Hunter Science High School. Welcome to both of you. Let me start off with a question that I really posed to both of you, but I focus on you, Junius, just to start. In fact, the numbers are shocking in some areas. Since 1998, there's been an increase of only 200 in the number of blacks in law schools, from 9,300 to 9,500, while the overall law school population has increased by 18,000, and a significant increase in the overall population. That seems to be a dramatic decline. What do you think is the cause?
I think you have to look at the pipeline, and the pipeline starts with high school, where less than half of our students in some places graduate, and then into college, where a lot of people matriculate, but because there's an absence of supports and other problems, they drop out, and therefore the pool that is available and ready for law school has been diminished by that much. So overall, I think we have a problem with what we're doing with education and how we're producing young people to step up to the bar, so to speak.
And let me take the pipeline metaphor and carry it back, because the question of where we intervene is one of the things we want to talk about. Would you say it starts in high school, or do you think really we're talking about Head Start and early childhood development as a starting point, Paul?
Well, I personally think that it starts with Head Start. And frankly, even before that, it really starts with the kind of homes we're bringing children into and the kind of advice they get from the day they're born throughout their whole educational process that helps determine whether or not we'll have a larger pool of students who are ready to take the challenge of going to law school.
Well, it's been a long time since Head Start, for example, came upon us during the Great Society, and I've never heard much of a substantive attack on the idea, but we don't fully fund it. And it seems as though it's a political uphill battle to have it extended as far as possible. Why would what seems like such a mom and pop idea in terms of the pipeline be such a difficult struggle?
Because this country has a long way to go to match the rhetoric with the reality. Just look at what's happened to the Abbott case. The Abbott case in New Jersey may be no more. And it was an opportunity to really put resources into the school systems that are failing in a lot of districts and continue that pipeline of resources. Hopefully, with an investment, then therefore more people would come out on the other end successfully.
What we're hearing is that the change in Abbott that we may face would be, instead of dollars going to districts, dollars following children. Is that a meaningful change? Is that a change that's designed to advance the ball, or do you think that's a lessening of emphasis on bringing kids who are in a substandard educational environment up to par?
Well, two things. It's good that the dollars are going to follow the child in that respect, but there are fewer dollars in this formula. And number two, we're looking at concentrated areas of poverty in those 31 Abbott districts. And the formula doesn't, when you look at the formula, there are really more questions than answers as to how much money is going to come through to be of help with some of the substantive programs that Abbott invented, such as the after-school programs, the tutorials in school, or even health centers within the schools. All of that has really going to be gone or minimized.
So it looks, Paula, as though the high school level program that Sandy emphasized in her report, like the LEAP Academy, which has been functioning for a long time in New York and is now hosted at Seton Hall, and perhaps even the high school you were involved with, are sort of the last chance to catch kids before you lose them, as opposed to the first chance.
Well, you never like to say the last chance, but I think definitely it's later in the process than it should be. One of the organizations I'm involved with in Newark is Team Academy, and I'm on their board of trustees. And their model of taking students at 5th grade, which is a great time to actually take students who might not be performing at grade level, but giving them an intensive instructional program that gets them to grade level by 8th grade is, I think, equally, if not more effective way to help redirect some children who might have gotten off track. And frankly, Team Academy is looking to start an elementary school as well. So we just keep, as we do more of this work, we go further and further back, in a child's life, because the earlier you start, the better outcomes you get.
Okay, so in a sense, the barriers have shifted from the ones that you and I knew about, where there was a question of whether you'd even be considered for admission, to perhaps a more open admission process, but the need to prepare folks to take advantage of that process.
Absolutely. In one of the Abbott cases, I think it was Abbott 4 or Abbott 3, one of the justices said that schools must be expected to do all that schools can do, which was a suggestion that you just can't go in there and teach reading, writing, and arithmetic anymore. I was just over in Harlem visiting Jeffrey Canada with the Harlem Education Zone, and he has that idea as well. There they are looking at many of the social factors that impede a child's ability to learn. So they're looking at health, they're looking at employment, they're looking at people buying into the whole concept of education as a cultural norm. So they're attacking it on many fronts, and that's what we have to be prepared to do.
And let me address an issue that interests me. For example, I had a chance not long ago to be involved with at least a day when there were some events relating to LEAP kids, and it's impressive to meet those kids because they're hungry, they are spending time on their own, but you also have the sense that those are kids that somebody's pushing or somebody's inspired. They can certainly use these kinds of programs, and it increases their chances, but that these are the kids who might have a shot anyway, but that there are a whole bunch of other kids, to sort of paraphrase a bad phrase from the last administration, who are going to be left behind. Is there a problem in terms of refocusing energy also on the kids who are on the verge of being in the juvenile justice system, or maybe been in and out once, or kids who are potentially going to be lost, to use a phrase, Paul, that you don't like to use?
The more energy that's spent on figuring out how to make sure more children actually take advantage of some of the opportunities that are open now that weren't, say, when my father went to law school or your father went to law school, I think the better.
But do you see evidence of a momentum to reach beyond kids who were sort of already the creme de la creme because they've got maybe skills and some inspiration, to kids who are not on track at all?
Well, I actually do see that, and the high school that I had the privilege of working on in New York, the Manhattan Hunter Science High School, aims just at those kids. We start the school in 9th grade, and it's aimed at those who are at or below grade level. Now, these are kids that haven't had any serious discipline issues in middle school, but they are sort of diamonds in the rough. They haven't excelled academically for whatever reason. Maybe they weren't enthused by one of their courses in elementary school.
How is the school done?
And then we screen the kids, and the kids, who meet our academic criteria, which is at or below grade level, they write a 250-word essay on why they're interested in science.
How is the school done in terms of the kids on the other coming out?
Coming out, it's done well. We're having our third graduation this year, so we're still relatively new. But in our first graduating class, we had 98.5% graduation rate, and we had about 86% of those who went on to college, which for this population of kids, which mirrors the population of New York, was a great result.
The reason I raise this question is that in the context of affirmative action, which lurks around the penumbra of this discussion, there is at least one critique that says that much of that benefit goes to kids or people who might, in the educational context, already maybe have a chance, as opposed to those who wouldn't have a chance and are thereby advantaged by it. What is your thinking? You, for example, you're an Ivy League graduate, right? Do you think affirmative action played a role in your success in getting into Ivy League school?
Oh, sure. Even though there wasn't any such thing as a quote-unquote affirmative action when I graduated, there was an out-and-out quota. There were 4 in my class, there were 4 in the class before that, and 4 in the class that followed me until the civil rights movement broke all of that out. So I don't know if affirmative action is the way I want to phrase this comment or not. I would look at it, we pay attention to children in school that are not successful, but school is set up for children who are unsuccessful and children who are successful. School is set up based on a model that says we have to test. So we lose all kinds of children because of that. Children are unsuccessful sometimes because they're just bored And children are unsuccessful in school because they're not taught in the way in which they learn best. So we have to really address the whole question of what is education? And I think we'll be able to save a whole lot of other people that way. Now, there's another prevailing sentiment. To catch the children up, you have to extend the school day, you have to extend the school week, extend the school year. I don't know, when I was coming along, I didn't want to stay in school all that time. And I would have rebelled. I just would have shut off. I think we have to do some unique and interesting things. And if I may dare say so on this august channel, maybe we ought to look at what they did in a place like Cuba, where the people who could read went to teach the people who could not read. So that now you have a little island like Cuba, which is the they have the most educated population in the Caribbean.
Well, is anybody articulating that model in the United States, although presumably they're not calling it the Cuban model?
No.
Is that being articulated? Because we live in a society where the mantra of the broader society is education comes first, and that within our community, the African-American community, education was always held up as the ultimate objective for advancement, both of the people as a whole and individuals. So why in that context, Paula, does there seem to be this backsliding in numbers, for example, in one craft, which is important to us, which is the law?
Well, I think that there's always a little bit of a disconnect between what we profess as being really important to us and something that we're putting money and effort into figuring out and what actually happens. So I think that we're experiencing a little of that disconnect here. And I think that there have been moves to come up with creative ways to engage children, to make the time that they spend in school more productive for them. And I think we need to direct more resources towards studying what actually works for kids. What is going to make their time in school successful for them? And it's different. It's not the same for every child.
If I ask each of you to make an observation about the public school systems you've observed, do you have a sense of optimism that at this moment there is a dynamic process of reinventing pedagogical techniques and approaches so that we don't begin to lose so many kids and that so we can do more with the ones who succeeded? Are you optimistic?
I see glimmers of it. I'm a bit optimistic.
Okay, that's a glimmer. Junius?
I see a gleam. I'm a bit optimistic. And we just have to get from under that umbrella of No Child Left Behind with all of that emphasis on test, test, test. And now we've got for example, we've got a new program coming along in New Jersey called High School and High School Redesign. And again, it's instituting more tests so that children will still trip and fall. But there are some people who are trying to undo that.
So to justify your relatively gentle optimism, we're going to have to undo 8 years of at least pedagogical leadership and financing on No Child Left Behind, alter that model, and then undo problems that existed before.
That's not quite what my position is. I mean, I think that testing is something that is a reality and something that has to be done, and that we shouldn't be afraid of testing. I think what we haven't done is examine how best to input knowledge into our children in a way that they can then regenerate it in the test format. And I think that there's real work to be done there, and I think there's some things that are being done now to examine that. And that's my opinion.
So is it true then that the focus in the future is not on issues that we've confronted in the past of overt or even covert discriminatory policies, for example, of admissions in higher ed, but rather on the more subtle and challenging questions of how we teach kids and how we fund the process by which they're taught?
I think so, because it's not a matter of being afraid of testing. I think you have to pass the test at one point. But A, what are you doing to prepare? And B, what is the focus of the test anyway? And C, what about some of those other life skills, such as how do you negotiate the political process in your community so that you are in a position to make sure you have the resources for the next generation? We don't teach civics anymore. We don't teach politics in schools in the way that we used to.
One last yes or no question. The numbers we started with, which showed that sort of shocking relative decline in minority admissions to law school. If we came back in 10 years to this spot and have this conversation, we'd be looking at numbers like that? A decline relative in percentage terms?
Limited to yes or no?
Yeah, because we're out of time.
Yes.
Okay, yes, but reluctantly. You think maybe not. Junior?
I can't answer that question in yes or no. I would say if we can undo some of the things that we've been talking about and institute some meaningful education, then yes.
Then qualify yours a little bit.
I qualify in the same way as Mr. Williams did.
Okay, so that's a sizable if, but nonetheless, it's important that we have a note that's guardedly optimistic. I do hope we get to resume that conversation. But for now, with my thanks to Junius Williams and Paula Tuffin, that's it for this edition of Due Process. But we hope you'll join us next week and every week for more cutting-edge issues of law and justice. Till then, for Sandy King and all of us here at Due Process, I'm Raymond Brown. Thanks for watching.
I think, from what I found, not in government work, people actually, once they get exposed to diversity and realize that the power diversity brings in enabling you to accomplish your mission, whether you're a private law firm or a government agency, people are hooked. They realize that problem solving as a function becomes much better, much more fluid and much more effective when you have a diverse set of perspectives. The problem is getting people to understand, to observe that process once and realize, hey, you know what? It's not necessary that I have 20 of the people who think the same way I do about a particular problem. Not that any one view is disvalued in any way. It's just better to have a multitude of them. And I think the more people see that and are exposed to that process, the better.
Major funding for Due Process provided by the New Jersey State Bar Foundation, committed to educating the public about the law, and by the Fund for New Jersey, supporting informed citizens for an effective democracy.